Today I want to look at the inbred shame that often goes along with being a victim of emotional incest. Shame is a tough one, you guys. I often mention this in some of my videos. It's a tough feeling to hold on to. We just want to push it away and get over it. You know that feeling of shame, that feeling of just, oh God, you just want to crawl in a hole. You want to run away. It's an uncomfortable feeling. But after all, it is just a feeling anyhow. It's just a feeling called shame, but it's a feeling that we often don't want to deal with. And the term inbred shame means there's something that brings you into the world where you are taught or conditioned, or you feel at a very early age that you have to deal with this shame. Now that may or may not be accurate, but that's the perception you have in your mind. You're giving it that judgment. This is something to be ashamed of. And if you're giving it that judgment, then chances are you're going to spend a lot of your life maybe dodging that feeling, blaming yourself somehow, guilting yourself even more because now you feel guilty that you are ashamed. So if we're ashamed of something later in our life, let's say you do something in your 20s or your 30s, and you look back and it's like, God, I was horrible there. I'm really ashamed of what I did. Well, it's one thing to approach it from the fact I was an adult. I did it. I'm ashamed of it. Let me go talk to a therapist about it. Let me get in touch with my feelings. Let me make sure that it's not controlling the rest of my life. So there's ways to handle it if it happens as an adult. But if you're born into what you consider to be inbred shame, which is really just the cultural norms or the conditioning, the kind of parents you have, maybe it's societal impacts, but whatever it is, there's something that you're thinking that you came into this world and something to be ashamed of. Let's examine that a little bit. Some quick examples of this is maybe you come into this world with some kind of physical disability and you're so ashamed or embarrassed that you have a limp as you're growing up. Or you're a short person, you're a dwarf, or you have a condition where you have no hair, no eyelashes, no eyebrows. It seems like there's a million things we can name where you come into the world a physical or even a mental disability of some kind. You think there's something inherently wrong with you and therefore you have inbred shame. When you're 4 or 5 or 6, you find out that your mom earns her living as being a stripper. You're so embarrassed. You can't go to school and tell people that. That's what you're telling yourself. It's something you're so ashamed of, what your parent does for a living. Or you come in with a skin color that's viewed as either too dark or too light. They're ashamed or embarrassed about how they came into life. Or being born gay. You may not even be aware of it till you're in your late teens or early 20s. Who knows? But all of a sudden you realize it's there. It ain't going anywhere. You're attracted to the same sex. Well, I brought this in. I'm ashamed of it. It's inbred shame. But of course, all of this are just judgments we're placing on ourselves with whatever the issue is. There may not be anything really wrong with anything other than you're just paying attention to how society views it, what the culture is, how your friends or family view something, etc. But it is worth looking at in terms of inbred shame, meaning we feel like we brought it into this life, we can't do anything about it, and one way we really feel that way is if you're a victim of abuse. In this case, I'll focus on emotional incest. Because you were taken over at a very early age. That's when it starts. Generally, it means that you're getting a lot of special attention. Now, this special attention can be coming from a narcissistic mother or father, but in a way to win you over, to get them on your side, to have them perform for you the way they want. There's big conditions attached to this. And the child, in trying to please the parent, loses sense of who they really are, what they're all about. Hence, they become ashamed. They become ashamed of really who they are on some level, because as they mature and get older, they're thinking that, I don't seem to be really loved for who I am. In fact, my parents don't seem to even want to know who I really am, but they seem okay and they're happy with me if I'm putting on a facade, if I'm acting, being what they want. Well, a child is not dumb. On an unconscious level, they certainly feel and see what's happening here. Now, consciously, they may have to block it because it's just too painful to deal with. So sometimes, most of the time, it's denied, it's pushed away. But on some level, on some unconscious level, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with the child because I'm not loved for who I really am, warts and all. It's very conditional, which then leads to self-loathing. There's something wrong with me, therefore lower self-esteem. I'm lower than, I'm not as good as. And so then we have shame about who we are. Sometimes just being, just taking up space. Depending on the severity of the abuse, the child could believe on some level, I'm not even supposed to be breathing air. I'm supposed to be just this thing, this robot, to please my parent. And I'm focusing more so on emotional incest, but this can be, again, for any form of abuse, any victim of abuse. Because the message you're getting from the perpetrator is there's something wrong with you, I'm taking advantage of you, I'm doing this to you, and by God, you have no choice but to take it. And the child begins on some level many times to think like, yeah, I'm supposed to be a doormat for people, that's what my role is. And with that doormat feeling comes shame. And then we blame ourselves, like we must have done something wrong. Somehow I contributed to this somehow. I know I must be responsible. So if we're taking any kind of responsibility, which is generally what all kids do who are victims of abuse, then they have no choice in a way but to feel some guilt and shame. Because A plus B equals C. The feelings of shame, depending on how often you have it, meaning depending on how severely you were abused, over time are going to simply erode one's self-esteem. Shame's a complex feeling because there's many levels to it, even what we call being humiliated or embarrassed. Those may be viewed as different levels of shame. I mean, if it's just a one-time thing where you're called out by a teacher in your second grade class and she says you're really stupid and you feel very embarrassed and humiliated by that, that can greatly affect the child for sure, but that level is different from a level where a child is systematically, ongoingly abused by a parent over many years, where it's not so much an event anymore, like the kid who's embarrassed in second or third grade. Now it's more of who you really are. And that's where it becomes a little more neurological, because when it's neurological and it seeps in there, we start to think it's real, we believe it. And that's why we have to be really careful and really attack shame, especially when we really, in essence, have nothing to be ashamed of, especially if you're a victim of parental abuse. And we have to work through that as an adult because you didn't do anything wrong, especially with emotional incest. I see a lot of clients who are victims of emotional incest. And most of the time they figure I'm sort of responsible for this as well. I should have stood up for myself when I was a younger age. I should have spoken up. Why did I tolerate it? Well, it's because you didn't know you're in it at the time. There's nothing to judge it with, to compare it to. And so it's your world. So there's no way, unless somebody helps you, steps in and guides you, that you could have known better. So quite often kids grow up with this, that were not helped in any way, and truly believe that they should have done something better when they were not capable of changing the situation. They were little kids. So the goal is, as we get older, is we need to have a new relationship with ourselves. We need to be able to separate what was heaped on us by some very sick people, perhaps, that's their stuff, not ours, not let their stuff permeate into our viewpoint of ourselves. If we let it permeate into our essence, then in fact, we probably will feel great shame because we're taking on their stuff. No, if you're a victim of emotional incest, but that's their stuff, not yours. That was your reality, yes. But you didn't cause that, and there's nothing wrong with you, and we need to put back on them what they tried to give to us. Like, no, that's your crap. You deal with that. I'm okay. I'm inherently okay. I had to deal with you as a child growing up. I had to put up with all your sick crap around me my whole life. But however, that's your stuff, and now you begin reclaiming yourself and having a new relationship with yourself. Begin trying to view yourself objectively, not subjectively. If it's subjective, that'll be the part of you thinking you did something wrong. I must have contributed, which you really didn't. If it's objective, then you can begin thinking of it in terms of what I was just describing it as. That you as a little kid were surrounded by sick adults, but you are not internalizing it now as an adult that you did something wrong or there's something wrong with you, because there's not. And so objectively, you're placing it back on them where it belongs. I hope this is helpful. Shame's a tough one. It's a tough feeling to work with. I know myself in my life, in my own therapy, it took me a long time to work with shame. That was the last feeling I wanted to deal with. And my therapist had to point it out to me many times over many years before I finally began to really peek at it and see what it really means, and then allow myself to feel it. And in the feeling of it, you just want it to go away. But the more you desensitize yourself and feel it and realize you can tolerate the feeling, the quicker you heal and the quicker it goes away, or at least diminishes. Please leave me some comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, feelings about shame. Please subscribe to my mental health YouTube channel if you like these kind of videos. And until next week, this is Brad Shore signing off from Ask a Shrink.